Imagine our job is to teach science to school students. And specifically, we have to create a lesson to teach them about density. Their age group is 11 to 14 years old. So they are young students and they have never heard of density before. So this is a difficult task, how to teach them this new concept. We will get the help of ChatGPT for this. But first, before going to ChatGPT, we have to do some background search. How do teachers normally teach this kind of lessons? How is a lesson planned? Before planning a lesson, we have to clarify our learning objectives. What do we want to happen at the end of this lesson? So, in this particular task, we want the students to understand the concept of density, and then they must be able to calculate densities of different materials. Then we will develop a rough structure for the lesson. So this is how teachers usually teach this kind of things. First, the teacher will give an explanation. They will explain the concept with a concrete example. Because if they just give the equation and do some mathematics, the students will not be able to understand. But if we explain with a concrete example and use the new concept in context, the students will be able to relate to it better. After that, we will give them the steps of calculating the density and also give them the definition of density and demonstrate a work example. After that, we will do an example together with the students and then ask the students to do an example by themselves. In the end, we will ask some questions. There are two purposes for these questions. First, we will ask the so-called retrieval questions just to check the knowledge of students, and then we will ask extend questions. These are questions that encourage the students to think beyond what is taught in the lesson. Okay, now we have a rough plan of what we want. Let us start. First, we need to explain the concept with a concrete example. How to do it? If we don't have an idea of how to do it, this is a good point to get to ChatGPT. Let us ask. First, let us give it some background information about the age group of students, what we need to teach, and so on. Now ChatGPT knows the basic background of our task. Now let us give more details of what we want. Next, we need to find out how to explain the concept with a concrete example and use the new concept in context. Okay. Now we have a lot of information, but we don't need all of them in this stage, because if we give these equations and these numbers at the very beginning, the students will be bored. We just need a concrete example. So this one sounds good. There are two identical boxes. One is filled with feathers and the other one is filled with rocks. Both of them have the same volume. The box filled with feathers is lighter. The box filled with rocks is much heavier. So we can say the box with rocks has a higher density. These are more examples, but we don't need them. We just need one example and that is enough. So let us add into our PowerPoint slides. In our slides, we can actually draw the two boxes. First, we have the box of feathers, then we have the box of rocks. Both of them have the same volume, but the box of rocks is much heavier. This is because the rocks have a higher density. So we have used the concept in context. Then let us ask help to do this. Definition of density, steps of calculating the density, and a worked example. We have got two responses at the same time. That's nice. Okay, both look very similar. Let us look at this one. There's a verbal definition of density. It is a measure of how much mass is there in a given volume. And there's a more abstract definition, a mathematical definition. And then we have the steps of calculating the density. Step 1, determine the mass. Step 2, determine the volume. Step 3, use this formula, and finally you get this density. Then we can do a worked example. We give some numbers, mass, volume, use the formula, get the density. So let us add this to our PowerPoint presentation. The definition is a measure of how much mass is packed to a given space or volume. We have a volume, we add mass to it, so relative to the volume, how much mass is there. And then we can introduce the mathematical equation to calculate the density. It is mass divided by volume. And then the steps of calculating the density. Step 1, find the mass. Step 2, find the volume. Step 3, the formula is to divide mass by volume, and then the answer is density. So let us demonstrate an example to students. There is a sample of wood with a mass of 6 grams and volume of 10 cubic centimeters. What is the density? Step 1, find the mass, 6 grams. Step 2, find the volume, 10 cubic centimeters. Step 3, divide the mass by volume, 6 divided by 10. The answer is 0.6 grams per cubic centimeters. Then we will work together with the students to solve an example question, and after that, ask the students to solve a problem independently. Here we give a different problem, but this time we ask input from the students. So first we can point out to one student and ask what's the first step, find the mass, and another student can answer what is the mass, 15 grams, and we can ask someone else what to do next. We divide mass by volume, 15 divided by 2, the answer is 7.5 grams per cubic centimeter. After that, we will give another example. This time, we ask the students to solve it by themselves and we give them a set time. For example, 30 seconds. Then we give the answer, and with it, that section is done. We demonstrate a worked example by the teacher. Then we work together with the students to solve an example question. And then we ask the students to solve a problem independently. Now, hopefully, the students have understood the concept of density and they know how to calculate the density. Next, we have to ask these questions. Retrieval questions to check their understanding and extend questions to encourage the students to think more. Retrieval questions are simple, but for this, we need some more ideas. So, this is definitely something ChatGPT can help us. So, retrieval questions are simple questions like this. We can select any of them. What is density? What's the definition? How to calculate the density? And so on. And I didn't ask for extent questions, but ChatGPT suggested some extent questions. Let us see whether there are any interesting questions here. These questions look good. We haven't introduced the concept of floating and sinking and its relevance to density yet. We can ask questions on that, but I'm not sure whether it is suitable. This is a very good question because we have already introduced the formula of density, its relevance to volume and mass. So the students will be able to think something for this question. So I like this question. But let us give ChatGPT one more chance to see whether it can come up with some better questions. We need more questions, especially considering the fact that these are young students and also they have just learned about the concept of density today. I don't need any more retrieval questions, so let us focus on these extent questions. I think these questions are too complicated, and let us go with this one. What will happen to the density of an object if you cut it in half? So we have two retrieval questions, some simple questions to check their understanding, and then we ask this question to help them think more beyond what we taught. This is how we get the help of ChatGPT to create an engaging lesson to teach a new concept to students. We will create more videos on how to use ChatGPT not only for teaching but for various other tasks as well. If you have any requests or suggestions or feedback, please post in the comments below.